Welcome back to the deep dive. Lots of requests this week for a deep dive into diabetes. So, that's what we're going to do. I think we all kind of know the basics, right? But today we're going way deeper into this condition. We'll explore everything, different types, causes, long-term effects, and even some prevention strategies.
Yeah, diabetes is such a complex condition, and understanding all these nuances is key, whether you're personally managing it or just want to stay ahead of the curve
Yeah.
when it comes to prevention.
Right. Okay, so let's dive in. Most people just think of diabetes as a blood sugar problem,
Yep.
but it's way more than that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. To understand it, I think we've got to start by thinking about how our bodies use glucose. It's a type of sugar,
Mm.
as fuel. You can think of it as like the energy drink for our cells, powers everything we do.
Okay, yeah.
Now, insulin, a hormone made by the pancreas, is like the key
Right.
that unlocks the doors to our cells, allowing the glucose to get in to provide that energy.
Got it. So insulin is the key, glucose is the fuel. But what happens when that system breaks down?
Well, that's where diabetes comes in. There are a few different ways that can happen. In type 1 diabetes, the body uh, basically stops making that key. The immune system kind of mistakenly attacks the cells in the pancreas, the ones that are responsible for insulin production.
Yeah.
So there isn't enough insulin to let the glucose into the cells.
Oh, so the fuel is there, but
Okay.
the cells are locked out. Gotcha. So then what about type 2? Is that a completely different scenario?
Yeah, it is a little different. You see, in type 2, it's kind of like the lock on the cell doors has become rusty. The body still makes insulin, but the cells don't really respond to it effectively. This is called insulin resistance.
Interesting. So the source material we have today mentions the liver, not just in storing glucose, but actually creating it too. I have to admit that part kind of caught me off guard. Could you elaborate on that a little? How does that all impact blood sugar regulation?
Yeah, sure. The liver is a bit like a glucose bank, storing excess glucose in a form called glycogen. Then it releases it back into the bloodstream when blood sugar levels drop.
Mhm.
Especially important between meals when you're not, actively taking in glucose.
Ah, okay. So it's this constant balancing act between the food we eat, the liver's activity, and then the insulin our pancreas produces. Wow, that's really complex.
Yeah, it really is. And when that balance gets disrupted, well, that's when we start seeing these different types of diabetes.
Right.
We've talked about type 1 and 2, but then there's also prediabetes and gestational diabetes.
Prediabetes is kind of like a warning sign, like your body saying, "Hey, something's not quite right here."
Exactly. It means your blood sugar levels are higher than normal,
Mhm.
but not, high enough for a type 2 diagnosis.
Mhm.
But the good news is that lifestyle changes can often prevent or delay it from progressing to, full-blown diabetes.
Okay, that makes sense. What about gestational diabetes? That's wild to me that diabetes can develop just during pregnancy.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. It's all these hormonal changes during pregnancy.
Mm.
They can really affect the body's sensitivity to insulin, which leads to gestational diabetes. And while it usually resolves after the baby's born, it's still really important to manage it carefully because it can pose risks for both the mother and the baby.
Wow. Okay, so we've got these different types, each with its own quirk. So what are some of the signs then that someone might be developing diabetes?
Well, that's the tricky thing. The symptoms can be really different depending on the type of diabetes and also how high the blood sugar levels are.
It's kind of a stealthy condition then, especially at first. Our source material says some people don't even notice any symptoms, especially with prediabetes or type 2.
Yeah, that's true. That's why those regular checkups and blood sugar screenings are so important.
Mm.
Much better to catch it early when lifestyle changes or, early interventions can really make a difference.
So what are some red flags that people should look out for?
Well, some common ones are increased thirst and urination, unexplained weight loss, fatigue, blurred vision, slow healing sores, and frequent infections.
Yeah.
But of course, if you have any of these, you should talk to your doctor to get a proper diagnosis.
Yeah, makes sense. It's interesting, though, that even after a diagnosis, they emphasize close medical follow-up until blood sugar levels stabilize.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Diabetes management is a continuous process. Close monitoring, especially at the beginning,
Hmm.
allows healthcare providers to really fine-tune treatment plans and ensure, the best outcome for the patient.
Okay, so let's dig into what actually causes diabetes. This is where things get interesting. The source material says the exact cause of most types of diabetes is actually unknown. But we know both genetics and environmental factors play a part.
Right. It's this really complex combination of nature and nurture. Researchers are still figuring it all out.
Yeah, so family history seems to be a big part of it. The source material says having a parent or sibling with type 1, well, it significantly increases your risk.
It does. Genetics are definitely a major factor, particularly for type 1. There's actually a lot of research going on right now. They're trying to identify specific genes that might make someone, more susceptible.
I see. There's this detail about how some family members of people with type 1 get tested for these specific immune system cells called autoantibodies. And this can indicate an increased risk, right?
That's right. These autoantibodies suggest the immune system may be attacking
Okay.
the insulin-producing cells in the pancreas, potentially leading to type 1 down the line.
Okay. So if you have a family history of type 1, getting tested for these antibodies can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And while having these autoantibodies doesn't mean you'll definitely develop diabetes, it does raise awareness
Hmm.
and allows for early monitoring and intervention if needed.
Right. It also points out that certain racial and ethnic groups are at higher risk for type 2. What's the thinking on that?
Well, that's a big area for more research. We don't have all the answers yet. But understanding why these differences exist is critical for developing, those targeted prevention strategies and addressing those health inequities.
I see. So, lots of questions still about the underlying causes of diabetes. One thing that is clear from the source material is the link between obesity and an increased risk for prediabetes, type 2, and gestational diabetes.
Yeah, obesity is a big risk factor. Excess weight makes it harder for the body to use insulin effectively, which, like we were talking about earlier, leads to that insulin resistance.
Right, and we know that's at the core of type 2. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, understanding what diabetes is, exploring those different types, and the interplay of genetic and environmental factors. But what happens when diabetes isn't managed well?
That's where we start getting into those long-term complications. And the conversation gets a bit more serious. They don't happen overnight, though, these complications. They develop gradually, and the severity is often linked to how long someone's had diabetes and how well their blood sugar has been controlled over time.
Right. The source material has this phrase, really stood out to me. Diabetes complications may be disabling or even life-threatening. That's a powerful statement.
Yeah, it really underscores the importance of taking a proactive approach to diabetes management. It's not just about avoiding immediate discomfort. It's about protecting your long-term health.
Yeah, it's a good point. You might be surprised to learn just how many areas of your health can be affected by diabetes over time. So let's explore some of the more serious consequences.
Okay, so one of the most concerning is cardiovascular disease. Diabetes significantly increases the risk of heart attacks, strokes, and other heart problems.
So basically, any issue related to the heart and blood vessels is more likely.
Yeah, pretty much. High blood sugar can actually damage the lining of your blood vessels, making them more prone to narrowing and hardening, which restricts blood flow. And that can lead to those serious cardiovascular events.
Okay, that makes sense. I've also heard that nerve damage is a common complication. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so that's called diabetic neuropathy.
Right.
And it's caused by high blood sugar damaging those tiny blood vessels that nourish the nerves. It often starts in the extremities, like your toes and fingers. Actually, I remember when I was training for a marathon, I had this tingling sensation. Turned out to be totally unrelated to diabetes, but it made me realize how easily those early symptoms could be missed or attributed to something else.
Oh, definitely. And that just highlights how important it is to pay attention to any unusual sensations and talk to your doctor, about them. With diabetic neuropathy, that tingling can actually progress to numbness, pain, even a complete loss of sensation, which can be really debilitating. Right. And if the nerves in the feet are affected, that can lead to problems with the balance and coordination too, right? Increasing the risk of falls.
Exactly. And, because of that reduced sensation, foot injuries might go unnoticed, which can lead to infections that are difficult to heal because of poor blood flow.
So it's not just the neuropathy itself,
Yeah.
but the cascading effects it can have.
Right, exactly. Diabetes complications often have that domino effect. One issue can trigger or worsen another.
Makes sense. What about kidney damage? That's another serious one, right?
Yeah, diabetic nephropathy or kidney damage is a major concern. Kidneys have these tiny blood vessel clusters. They act as filters, removing waste from the blood. But diabetes can damage these filters, which impairs the kidney's ability to function.
Gotcha. And if the kidneys aren't working properly, that can lead to a buildup of toxins in the body.
Exactly. It can lead to fluid retention, high blood pressure, and even kidney failure, which might require dialysis or a kidney transplant.
Wow, it's amazing how something that starts out as, a blood sugar problem can have such a huge impact on all these different organs.
It really is. And we haven't even talked about eye damage yet, which is also known as diabetic retinopathy. High blood sugar can damage the blood vessels in the retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of the eye, leading to vision loss or even blindness.
It really is sobering to think about how something that seems manageable at first can have such serious consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just the physical impact either. Diabetes can take a real toll on mental and emotional well-being. The source material mentions an increased risk of depression and anxiety.
Right. That makes sense. It's a lot to deal with, both physically and emotionally.
For sure. It's crucial to have a strong support system and access to resources to help you navigate all of that.
Our source material mentions some less common complications too, like skin problems, hearing impairment, and even an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
Really drives home how diabetes is a systemic disease.
It does. It's not just about blood sugar control. It's about overall health.
Right. We can't forget about gestational diabetes either. It's not just the mother's health, but the baby's too.
Exactly. For the baby, there's a risk of excessive growth because of the high blood sugar levels. And that can lead to complications during delivery. There's also a risk of low blood sugar after birth, and even an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes later on in life.
And for the mother, gestational diabetes increases the risk of preeclampsia, which is a serious condition with high blood pressure and protein in the urine.
Right. It also increases the likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes later and having gestational diabetes again in future pregnancies. So managing it carefully is really important for both the mother and the child.
Okay, wow. Lots to think about here. But it's important to remember that we have a lot of power when it comes to preventing diabetes in the first place. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about what you can do to lower your risk. It can feel kind of overwhelming hearing about all these complications, but I think it's important to focus on the positive side now. Prevention.
Yeah, I agree. While we don't have a way to prevent type 1 yet, there's still a lot we can do to reduce the risk of developing pre-diabetes, type 2, and even gestational diabetes.
Right, and our source material emphasizes that lifestyle choices are really key here. It's not all about genetics. We have a lot of control.
It is empowering, knowing we can make choices every day that directly affect our risk. It's not about being perfect, just making small changes, sustainable changes that add up over time.
Okay, so let's break down those strategies. What does healthy eating look like when it comes to diabetes prevention?
Well, it's about focusing on whole, unprocessed foods, the
Mhm.
kinds that are naturally lower in fat and calories and higher in fiber, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats.
So ditching the processed stuff
Yeah.
and filling your plate with good stuff. Makes sense.
Exactly. It's not about deprivation. It's about nourishing your body.
Right. What about physical activity? How much do we need?
The general recommendation is at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise most days of the week. That could be brisk walking, swimming, dancing, cycling, anything that gets your heart rate up a bit.
So it doesn't have to be like crazy workouts, just got to move.
Exactly. Find something you enjoy and make it a part of your routine.
Right. The source material is very clear about losing even a small amount of weight, if you're overweight or obese. Can significantly reduce your risk.
Oh, absolutely. Even just a 5–7% weight loss
Mm.
can have a huge impact on insulin sensitivity and blood sugar control.
That's good to know. It feels more attainable. Small steps.
Exactly. Sustainable changes that you can stick with.
Speaking of sustainable changes, the source material also says weight loss shouldn't be attempted during pregnancy.
Yeah, that's important. During pregnancy, it's about healthy weight gain
Hmm.
and talking to your doctor about your specific needs.
Good point. It also mentions medication like metformin as a potential preventative measure for type 2.
Yeah, metformin can help improve insulin sensitivity, so it's sometimes prescribed for people at high risk.
Another tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that medication should always be used alongside lifestyle changes,
Right. Those healthy habits are the foundation.
for sure.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of diabetes. We covered so much, from blood sugar regulation to the different types of diabetes and those serious complications.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But we also talked about prevention and the power we have to lower our risk through healthy choices.
Absolutely.
So, to our listeners, what are you going to take away from all this? What are you going to apply to your own life or even share with others?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can find us on social media or leave a comment on the episode page.
Great. Remember, Informed individuals are empowered individuals, especially when it comes to health.
Absolutely.
And this is just the beginning.
There's so much more to learn,
Yeah.
and so many resources out there.
We'll be sure to include some links in the show notes.
Awesome. So until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep taking care of yourselves.
And we'll see you on the next deep dive.